So now I want to turn to a set of issues, um, really set of ethical issues, set of ethical implications that we might have if we lack free will. And these are all centered around things to do with personal relationships and love. So let's start by thinking about whether we could still apologize if we lacked free will. So you might worry, well, if you apologize for stuff, you're apologizing for stuff you've done wrong, but not just stuff you've done wrong, but stuff you're at fault for doing, stuff you're blameworthy for. You know, if somebody, lacks free will and wasn't blameworthy for something they did, and often we'd say they don't really owe an apology. So if a friend comes to you and says, look, I'm really, really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I forgot your birthday, but I was held up at gunpoint in this hostage situation. Um, you would say, well, I mean, I think most people would say, I kind of understand why you couldn't remember my birthday, given that you were held hostage. So given that this person was being kind of forced to do something against their will, they weren't able to act freely and of their own free will, and so they don't seem blameworthy for forgetting your birthday. And so an apology seems kind of out of place. And this suggests that apology itself presupposes that people are blameworthy. If someone's going to sincerely apologize, or we're going to sincerely demand an apology from someone, they have to be blameworthy for their conduct. Now, if no one's blameworthy for their conduct because they lack free will, and then they're never going to say have a good ground for saying sorry. People might say sorry, but it's never really going to be sincere because everyone's going to know that nobody ever acted freely. No one ever had free will. So if there's no free will, it seems like sincere apology goes with it. Like apologies seem like a fairly significant part of our sort of moral and social lives. So it'd be quite a conspicuous absence. It would be, you bump into someone on the train and you go, no free will. You forget someone's birthday, say, no free will. It would be your excuse for everything and life would be very different. Perhaps we just adapt. But some free will skeptics have said, well, you can still apologize if we have free will. So Bruce Waller in particular has argued that there can be sincere apology without free will. One way to sort of see how there could be sincere apology is to look at arguments that people have made for there being sort of apologies that don't require blameworthiness, that don't require us acting freely. So consider the following kind of case. Suppose there's a lorry driver driving down the road, driving very safely. They're doing all the proper checks. They're looking in their mirrors, and then suddenly somebody walks out in front of them, and they hit that person, killing them. Now, what would be your reaction in that kind of situation, right? Something has happened to you through no fault of your own, but it's something significant, the death of another person. You've caused the death of another person. It's not your fault. You're not to blame. You were driving safely. This person walked into the road and you hit them. Now, most people, it seems, think that they'd feel certain negative emotions here. They'd feel at least a kind of regret. They'd sort of wish that this thing hadn't happened. Now, many people have claimed, including the philosopher Bernard Williams, that it's very natural to feel a kind of regret here, which he calls agent regret. And often this form of regret will express itself through apology. So quite plausibly, we could imagine a lorry driver apologizing to the friends and family of the person they killed for killing that person, even though it's not the lorry driver's fault. So we could ask here, well, is that kind of apology appropriate? So in his paper Moral Luck, Bernard Williams says it would be an insane conception of rationality that said that a lorry driver couldn't feel agent regret. And we can extend from that point that it would be an insane conception of rationality that says that it would be inappropriate for the lorry driver to apologize. The idea here is just that it's very, very natural in these kinds of situations for people to sort of apologize and feel regret for what they've caused, even if they're not at fault, even if they haven't freely brought about a particular outcome that they've caused. People still have these emotional reactions to it. And this includes actually apologizing. We do sometimes apologize for this kind of thing. So we might also consider more everyday cases. It's not always very significant or dramatic cases involving murder. You imagine that, your friend forgets your birthday through no fault of their own. Perhaps they're just very busy at work. It's not a hostage situation or anything. They're just quite busy at work and a little bit stressed. Like, we can imagine it's not really their fault. Like, all the work has come on them all at once and they've forgotten all their commitments and the aim of, feeding their family, earning money to be able to feed their family. Very understandable indeed. But it also wouldn't seem misplaced, at least, for them to apologize. Now, it might well be that you say, well, you don't really need to apologize. I understand the situation. But it's still nice for them to apologize. It still kind of makes sense. They might not owe you an apology, but it still makes sense. And like, there's still a good function this has in our relationship with others when they apologize for this kind of things. This kind of thing demonstrates that they care for us quite a lot. And that's nice to know. We want our friends and family to sort of show these kinds of things. It's reassuring, makes us trust them more, makes us feel warm and wanted and that we belong. So there's at least some sense in which they should apologize. It's maybe not a demand, maybe they don't owe it, but there's at least some sense. So if we can make sense of apologies being sincere in these cases, even though people aren't blameworthy, we don't even falsely believe they're blameworthy. We know they're not blameworthy. That person might even know they're not blameworthy and yet still apologize. If we can make sense of apologies in this kind of situation, then we can have sincere apologies without blameworthiness. But it's important to really bear in mind what these apologies consist of, right? Because usually we think apologies might involve kind of like guilt or an expression of one's blameworthiness or us kind of admitting you're at fault. Can't really have that, right, in these cases. And if we're imagining this kind of apology being the kind of apology we have in a world without free will, the apology is going to be quite different. There's going to be no feeling of guilt, or no appropriate feeling of guilt, at least, no appropriate acceptance of blame, because free will really will make those inappropriate. At best, our apologies in a world without free will express agent regret, this form of regret that we feel over things that we accidentally bring about, or these outcomes that were sort of unintended and we had no control over bringing about, but are still causally connected to, insofar as we are the cause of those things. So it does allow, so the free will skeptic, whether they're a hard incompatibilist, hard determinist, or impossibilist, can allow that in a world without free will, there's a kind of apology. But it has this kind of strange implication that now all apologies are like the friend's apology for being forgetful, or like the lorry driver's apology for, accidentally bringing about someone's death. It is going to be a bit of a cost to accept that, an apology for, deliberately bringing about someone's death or deliberately forgetting someone's birthday is going to be no different. But it's not clear how the free will skeptic, the hard incompatibilist, is going to make sense of, or going to sort of justify any difference in these apologies. It seems like they have to accept that all these apologies are on a par. And again, that's a cost, and it's a big change to our practices, because normally, okay, we accept that people can apologize when not at fault, but that's very much contrasted to apologies when people are at fault. And in a way, the apologies when people are not at fault are kind of capitalizing on the fact that we know what an apology, we know what the kind of at fault or blameworthy apologies are like, and the other apologies sort of trying to approximate that for some other sort of moral and social purpose. But now everything is just kind of the same with, sorry for bringing that about, determinism. I mean, maybe that's a little bit glib, and there'd be a bit more of a heartfelt apology in a world without free will. But the point remains that all the apologies they're not going to be distinguishable in the way that they're currently distinguishable